I was 22 and believed in two things. The sea obeyed physics, and orders were laws written in metal. I learned both lessons the hard way. I was posted aboard a Victor-class attack submarine, Project 671 in Soviet terms, a svelte nuclear hunter-killer designed to chase NATO boats and keep our sea lanes quiet. We were a close crew, 3 decks of hot metal, 12 torpedoes, and a habit of sleeping with one ear on the hull. The Victor boats were workhorses of the Cold War Soviet fleet, fast, dangerous, and built to hunt. Our patrol took us under the North Atlantic haze in late 1983, running dark and low, slipping through thermal layers like a shark through glass. The days and nights blurred into the constant phosphorescent glow of instrument panels. In the sonar room, I learned to read the ocean like a score. Pings, returns, the soft hiss of distant screws, the menacing geometry of thermoclines. We ran passive when we could, active when we had to, and we kept radio silence unless Moscow said otherwise. Radio silence was religion on a sub. Breaking it without orders meant death to your career, and during times of tension, worse. Communication with submerged subs is hard by design. Very low frequency and extremely low frequency waves can crawl through seawater for a few dozen meters. The hardware is massive and deliberate and usually tied to shore transmitters. When command needs to speak to a boat beneath the waves, they either force you to periscope depth and hoist an antenna, they trail a buoy, or they use those slow guttural VLF-ELF channels that hum like a faraway engine. The trade-off is always the same. You gain reach at the cost of speed and clarity. If you want a fast, authenticated order, you expect it to come from a known transmitter, a shore station with an ID you can verify. We were 2 weeks into the patrol when the impossible began. The first hint was subtle, a logged ping on the command frequency that didn't match a known source. Our radio man, a careful man named Zaitsev, flagged it at 0312 hours. A carrier at long wave, tightly coded, repeating at odd intervals. It had the cadence of a fleet broadcast, but not the signature of any NavCent or Northern Fleet transmitter we knew. The sequence identification, the little fingerprint that should tell you who is speaking, returned null. No bearing, no origin. Like a radio ghost with the right keys and no address. We shrugged it off at first. Signal anomalies happen in the Atlantic. Solar activity, ionospheric drift, multipath reflections. Good sonar techs and radio techs build explanations like scaffolding to keep their nerves steady. But the radio man looked at the console and went white. He told the captain quietly, "It's formatted like command. It has authentication. But the header reports a transmitter ID that doesn't exist in the Navy's registry." He said it like he was reading an error message off a dying machine. The captain's face tightened. He is the sort of man whose entire life is the calculus of speed and decision. When to evade, when to press, when to take a risk. He ordered the usual precautions: remain submerged, go silent, monitor. He asked the radio man to record the burst and cue it for the Admiralty if it happened again. Smart, by the book. Except the message repeated. At 0623 hours, it came again, but this time the format had an extra tag, a one-line instruction in plain text beneath the code. Proceed to rendezvous point 2317. Execute contingency protocol Omega. Acknowledge. No checksum, no call sign, no logged source. And this was the part that made men swallow hard. The coordinates were for a patch of water where there was no charted rendezvous, and where our maps showed only abyssal plains and thermocline turbulence. We had no business there, and nobody had declared such a point. We did not acknowledge. We had an order. Don't break radio silence. Don't respond to unauthenticated traffic. But every officer in the room had their hands on the rail. The captain paced, head in his hands. Something cold crawled along the hull of me, a certainty that the world had misfiled a page and we were about to read it. The thing about submarine life is that procedure is a talisman. We have checklists for everything, for reactivity, for leak seals, for main ballast operations. A captain gives an order, it flows down like oil, but orders need to be traceable. We need an origin, a leader, a source we can point to on the world map if things go sideways and someone asks why we did what we did. This message had no address, no trace. That alone should have made us ignore it, but whatever crafted that packet had the right keys to look legitimate. The auth header matched the cryptographic cadence we were taught, the machine-sung phrases our ears learned to trust. It had the tone of Moscow. Could be spoofing, I remember the XO saying, in a voice that tried not to shake. He was right. Clever men forge things every day. But the next half hour taught us the real lesson. At 0830 hours, the message came again, but broadcast not only on our long-wave channel, but relayed in a fractured way on local naval VHF channels. The FleetNet confirmed partial receipt in a distant listening post. Logs that showed a packet with the same impossible transmitter ID and the same impossible order, acknowledged on a relay mast on Baffin Island. The relay's metadata traced back to a facility that wasn't listed in any of the registries anyone aboard had access to. The mast existed on paper, but there was no code name, no frequencies assigned, not even a maintenance schedule. The administrative grid showed a hole, the sort of thing you only get when someone erases an entry on purpose. We were now history's poor math problem, an instruction arriving from nowhere that carried weight, cadence, and, more dangerously, plausible authority. The captain convened the Combat Information Center, and we argued. The navigator ran the coordinates through every map. The radio techs drained every circuit for anomalies. The political officer read the packet again and again, like someone poring over scripture. He muttered the word we didn't want to hear: deception. But even he admitted we lacked proof. For hours we floated, listening to the ocean and to each other. The crew told stories in low voices about phantom broadcasts, ghost transmitters that appeared on maps and were gone the next morning. Those were things of intelligence folklore, interesting, spicy rumors at the mess table. They were nothing compared to the packet we had. This one talked like a real command. At 1400 hours, another packet landed, and this time the header had an addition, a rolling checksum that matched one of our submarine's own long-term mission keys. The captain turned that piece of paper over in his hands, as if it were a physical thing he could bend back into sense. The checksum was unique to our boat and to the task force. It was, in other words, internal. It should have been impossible for an outside transmitter to know, and yet the packet had it. We had a message, authenticated with our own mission key, carried on a transmitter that did not exist according to the registry, telling us to move to a place where we had no orders. It smelled like treachery, but it smelled even more like a trick designed to make us act. This is the half-truth that lives in the marrow. The moment you can't be sure whether the order came from your command or from a stranger, you can no longer tell whether obeying is patriotism or folly. The captain's decision was methodical. He initiated protocol for unauthenticated orders, increased sonar pickets, deploy the decoy buoy, drift off the assigned track at holding depth, send a notification packet to Fleet Command on the secure line stating the reception of an unauthenticated command and our intention to hold. In theory, that was enough. In practice, it was escalation by the book. The sort of move that would have kept us alive if someone higher up were watching, and someone else were honest in a world of honest things. We held. For 12 hours we held, listening to the ocean and to the night. The crew was restless. The radio man kept replaying the burst on loop. The message didn't change, but sometimes, in the hiss between repeats, the carrier seemed to breathe. That's the thing about long-wave and ELF channels. The sea acts like a filter and gives the signals a personality. The radio man swore he heard a cadence under the code, a whispering rhythm that filled the cabin like distant surf. Then the impossible third thing happened. Our captain, a man who had lost friends to depth charges and to ice, got a message himself, transmitted by the radio operator on the same console but on an internal talker. He held the handset up and listened. The message was duplicated, word for word, and then the line went dead. But on the captain's screen, in the mission log, someone with access we lacked, had already placed an execute flag beside the order. The Admiralty's hash had been inserted in the ledger. A flag appeared in a place where only an admiral could set it. We did not execute. We refused on the grounds that no proper chain of custody existed for the command. We stayed our course. We continued to shadow a NATO exercise at range, the entire while sweating because the ocean was a place that rewarded movement and punished hesitation. The next dawn we surfaced for a brief emergency status run. The bridge was bright and cold with the North Atlantic wind. Through the hatch, the deck smelled of salt and diesel and 1,000 little human things. In the distance, on the horizon, a black speck of a surface ship broke the line. It was a destroyer on a course that put it in the general direction of the coordinates in the ghost message. When the captain ordered the lookouts to fix a visual, the ship's signal flags were unreadable at that distance. The navigator tugged at his collar. In the radio room, the console gave a faint, almost inaudible chirp, a message on a maintenance channel from a relay we all thought was disused.
The message was short.
2 letters and a single coordinate correction that nudged the rendezvous point by exactly 3 nautical miles. That 3-mile shift put the rendezvous point over an abyssal canyon and outside our standing orders, but inside a known thermal pocket that could hide a submarine. The message appeared to come from a maintenance transmitter with an ID that corresponded to a civilian research site. The captain looked at it and then at the sky. He did something I still think about. He tore the paper instructions from the radio clerk's hand and burned them in the cat-like glare of the bridge lamp. We ate cold rations with our hands the next day and sailed on. For 2 days, nothing happened. The ocean sang its normal songs. Then midnight came, and the carrier came alive again, not with an instruction this time, but with a voice on the secure talker. A human voice, thin and steady, saying our captain's name. It wasn't his name used by the crew. It was the formal, full rank and family name used in official communiques. The voice said two things: "Execute Protocol Omega" and "We are tracking. Do not engage unless you are fired upon." QR-coded authority. The thing about a voice on the secure talker is that you can't fake it from the sub. The path routes through known secure nodes. To hear one means an authenticated channel was open and nested. The voice ended with the terse "acknowledge." The captain stared at that little glowing lamp of authority. He sat and put his hands on his face. He made a decision no captain wants to make in a world where orders are law. He ordered a limited maneuver, a benign repositioning that would put us marginally closer to the phantom point, but under the pretext of chart correction for meteorological reasons. A move that gave him plausible deniability. We executed the maneuver slowly, as if moving a chess piece, and the ocean let us slide. The radio man monitored the repeat transmissions. They stopped. The carrier, that had been breathing like an animal for 3 days, fell silent. The Admiralty's execute flag vanished from the log, as if it had never been set. We did not celebrate. In the privacy of the wardroom, the political officer recited doctrine with a flat mouth. Obey orders, defend the motherland, honor chain of command. Around the table, men drank black tea and said nothing. The captain went below and stared at his hands in the dim light of his cabin. I think he was trying to decide whether to trust the machinery that told us the voice was real or the instincts that told it was not. We returned to port in due course and filed the appropriate logs, administrative notes that would be examined by committees with titles that sounded like flowers and teeth. The official report was cautious. Received unidentified transmission, retained course, reported to Fleet Command. No one wrote about the non-existent transmitter ID, the checksum that matched our keys, or the way an execute flag had briefly appeared. Those were ideational things, the kind that get carved out of reports in pencil.
A year later, when I had been moved off that boat and onto a desk that smelled faintly of wax, I found myself reading a declassified brief tucked in a narrow library at the academy. The paper was grainy, stamped with red "Communication Anomalies at Sea, Case Studies." One of the appendices matched our incident and 3 others spanning a decade. The cases used different boats and different oceans, always a transmitter that left a hole in the registry, always authenticated payloads, always instructions that smacked of high authority, and always a hurried whitewash afterward. The brief argued technical hypotheses, reflection artifacts, Soviet-era administrative overlaps, compromised relay nodes, and it recommended procedural fixes, additional nonce checks, multi-factor verification for execution flags, and greater skepticism. It was the sort of fix that bureaucracy loves. It makes a thing feel contained. But the paper also had a single line that stuck to my ribs like a cold coin. Signals that carry internal keys but no origin must be treated as potential profile attacks. Adversaries may use documented cryptographic cadence to coerce compliant responses. Princeton University, +1. We are trained for many things in the Navy: depth control, launch procedures, collision avoidance.
We are not trained for the idea that an order can be generated out of the graph of trust itself, that someone might hand you a set of credentials and expect you to believe them simply because they look like the right keys. The sea rewards reaction, and sometimes reaction is the wrong answer. After that patrol, some officers were quietly reassigned. A senior radio tech left the service and emigrated months later. He never spoke much about what he'd heard, only that his console had recorded metadata that should not have been known. The captain took early retirement a few years after, citing health. He smiled through his cigarette smoke, but never seemed to sleep peacefully again. Years later, in quieter hours, at a small table with a kettle and a stack of official-looking envelopes I am not supposed to have, I still hear that carrier in the static. Not often, not daily, but sometimes late at night, the old long-wave hum comes back to me, a residue in my bones. When I tell the story now, I do not offer a neat moral. It might have been espionage. It might have been an error. It might have been someone in our own service creating plausible orders to test obedience. Or it might have been something that learned our keys, patient as mold, opportunistic as rust. The real lesson I carry is small and animal. When a command arrives with the cadence of truth, but without an origin, treat it like a stranger at your hatch. Close the hatch, do not step out first. The line between obedience and destruction is not always obvious, and the sea has time to test the patience of men. And occasionally, on nights when the instruments are quiet and the deck smells of sea and diesel, I reach for the radio, tiptoe to the long-wave band, and listen, because there are noises in the world that do not want to be explained, they just want to be obeyed.